Hello and welcome to the first VMK in the Shader Engine series. I'm so excited to finally get this series off the ground. I've been working at getting the code developed and in a functional state for about a half a year now. And finally I got it to a stage where I'm relatively satisfied with what I have. So I went ahead and made a quick little game using the engine at its current state, and that's the game called Zing, which you can download from the forums to give it a try. So you might be wondering, what is the shader engine all about? Well, if we head on over to the forum, if you were keeping an eye on the forums, you'll notice that I've added a new section here, Shader VMK, which says, this VMK series is a continuation of the Game Engine and Ghost Toast VMK series. In those other VMK series, you have seen how to develop the Game Engine mainly using OpenGL version 1.0 features. In the Shader VMK series, the Game Engine is going to be rewritten using advanced C++ features, and the renderer will be updated to use core OpenGL 3.x specifications. Depending on how things go, I may also go into OpenGL 4.x specifications. It all really depends on whether you guys are interested or not. Visual C++ 2010 is going to be used in the series since that's the compiler that I now have installed on my computer. And you'll need something equivalent or above to be able to follow along. And the rationale for that is I will be using new features of the C++ programming language, which were not available in the older compilers. Now, that's not to say that if you have an older compiler, you won't be able to follow along, because you definitely will be. You will just need to make some minor modification changes to your source code to be able to compile. With these new features in 2010, there's new keywords that are available to the developer, there's new syntax, there's new supported features within the standard template library, which I will be taking advantage of. So if you have an older compiler that doesn't support these features, you'll have to write your codes in a slightly different way to accomplish the same behaviors. So just be aware that if you're writing your code and it's not compiling, but in the videos you notice that it is compiling, it's probably a compiler issue that you're running into. Okay, so what does this mean? It's a continuation of the Game Engine and Ghost Toast series. Well, going back here, I've added the VMK viewing chart, which you can see how all the VMKs on the website are related to one another. And by looking at the columns along the top here, we see we got networking, we have general C++, we have OpenGL game engine, audio, what other main ones are there? There's the Ghost Toast one, physics engine, and so on. And you'll notice that everything basically boils down to you have to have a general knowledge of C++. So you do need to go through all the C++ VMK series before really getting started. Once all of those are done, you can jump into the OpenGL Game Engine series because those really are the introduction to how to create an engine. So you'll see going through all of these VMKs here, we've put together an engine that allows you to load 3D models, display UI on the inside of the engine, you'd be able to move around in 3D, all of that stuff. Once that was complete, then we moved on over to create the game Ghost Toast, and that expanded upon the Game Engine series because then we started adding in new features for physics, for animations, for manipulating the GUI. All of that was incorporated here in the early VMK, and then we finished off with actually developing the Ghost Toast game. Well, now we've reached the end of the Ghost Toast series, and looking at the source code for the entire game, I've noticed that I think it's now time that we can say successfully that all of the beginner stuff is done. We can now move on to the more advanced game development design and coding practices. So that's where the shader engine is going to start off. Now, to be able to do that kind of work, you will need to be able to use exceptions. You will need to be able to write good templates in C++. That's stuff that I haven't really dealt with in too much detail yet inside of the C++ series. So you'll notice that I added a new VMK just recently on exceptions. Go through that, make sure you understand how exceptions work, because what I'm going to be doing is really taking the source code we have for Ghost Toast and rewriting it completely so that it now is going to work entirely using exceptions. Now, because the shader engine is a new VMK series, I have the luxury of starting fresh. Because we're going to be starting fresh, there's going to be some code which I'll be taking from Ghost Toast, some code which I'll be taking from the OpenGL game engine series, but for the most part it's going to be rewritten in such a way that it's easier to manage, it's cleaner to look at, and it's going to accomplish a lot more stuff for you when you are developing games. So because shaders introduced this concept of having your code running on the GPU as opposed to primarily on the CPU, which is how we've been writing code up till now, we can then split logic that will run on your computer and logic that will run on your video card. To be able to support that kind of thing and make it modular enough, you do need to go into templates. If we don't go into templates in heavy detail, then we would end up having to write a lot more code by hand, which we don't want to be doing. So that's why we're going to be diving into templates a lot. Exceptions will be used quite heavily to make sure that our code is very clean to read because as you'll see in the exception VMK, we separate out the normal path of logic flow versus the path of logic flow if there's an error. The other big switch is we're moving over to the new C++ standard. So C++ 11, which was formerly known as 0x, has been released as of August 2011, and new compilers such as the Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 do support a lot of the features that are spec'd out in the new standard. Inside of this Wikipedia article, they sort of summarize what new features there are. Let's just quickly scroll through here, see if I can point out some of the things that we'll be using. Make sure you have a read through here if you aren't not too familiar with the differences between the old spec and the new spec. One thing that will be changed to the new shader engine is initializer lists will be used far more heavily than they were in the other VMK series. So that's going to be a big change for us. Range-based for loops, this is something that will be used inside of the new VMK series. There's a bunch of syntax changes, constructor improvements, explicit overrides. Yes, there's a few new keywords that have been added in the standard. I'll be trying to use as many of those keywords as possible, such as final. There's the keyword for override. I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head right now, but there will be some of those introduced in the shader engine. The null pointer constant, we'll be using null pointer in the shader engine as opposed to the old C syntax, which is null, to represent that a pointer is invalid. So that's going to be changed. Right angle brackets, right. Previously, this kind of operator broke our compiler when we tried doing it for vectors. So if you had a vector of certain kinds of items and you tried to declare them, the compiler would complain if you had two angle brackets side by side. That's been fixed in Microsoft C++ 2010. So that's just another little convenience, really. The explicit keyword, we're going to be using that quite heavily. Aliasing of templates, we'll be using a lot of template coding styles, so make sure you are familiar with templates. Make sure you do have a relatively solid background of understanding how templates work in C++. Smart pointers. We do use a lot more smart pointers in the shader series. Previously, I don't think I used very many of them in the game engine series or even in Ghost Toast for that matter, but definitely in the shader engine series, because of the way that we're going to be using exceptions, we do want to be using smart pointers. So you will find that there are not very many raw pointers used across the engine at all. Everything is going to be a smart pointer. Random number generator, we will be replacing the standard C library random number generator with the one that is provided inside of the C++ 11 standard. So that's going to come in handy. So there were quite a few changes in the C++ standard. If you want to actually read out the real differences, have a read through the external links. They go into far more detail than this wiki page article that just sort of summarizes what has been changed. Those are just some of the things to expect to see in the Shader Engine series. We will be doing a lot more work with function pointers. We will be using more advanced coding style. My coding standard has slightly shifted as well, which I think I described in one of the C++ VMK series. So if you follow through in those, you will see that there is a VMK describing the coding standard that I moved from to the new coding standard that I'll be using. Also, I highly recommend that you guys go and grab one of these free tools for the new C++ class. This is an add-on that I created for Visual Studio, which introduces a new menu option inside of the Tools drop-down for Visual Studio. Now, if you are using the free version of Visual Studio, you won't be able to use this tool because it doesn't support add-ons. But if you do have the full version of Visual Studio, do install this add-on. What it'll do is it'll add this option here. You click on it, it'll bring up a window where you can type in the name of a class you want to add. When you hit create class, what it does is it uses a template here defined using for the header file and the source file, and it fills it all in for you very quickly. So it just saves you a lot of typing out anytime you're creating a new class. I use this add-on quite heavily when writing the shader engine, so you may want to also save yourself some typing by installing the add-on and using it when you're following along in the videos. So I think that's all I wanted to say in the intro for the Shader Engine series. The series will be available to anyone who has a premium membership to the website. So you'll be able to download the VMK or purchase the complete Ghost Toast game design series. Then you'll be able to also download the Shader Engine VMKs. If you haven't purchased the VMK bundle part 1 and 2, then you will need to purchase a premium membership to be able to download any of the Shader Engine videos from the website.